What's up guys, Phoenix here. This video is going to be another Deck Doctor video, and this time it is going to be on the Skull Servant Zombiesworn-esque deck that was sent in by Ben Coleman that I played for a couple games on my channel very end of 2015. In fact, I think it was like the last 2 days of 2015 that the videos of me playing this deck went up on the channel. Now, this is one that I wanted to get to for Deck Doctor simply because I knew that I could actually tweak this deck around and it wouldn't nearly matter as much as it did with the Minerva deck, because this deck is heavily style based. This deck, I can't really see it being overly competitive because of simply there's too many flaws in the Skull Servant and white overall cards. There's too many flaws in them, and they're not powerful enough to keep up in any form of metagame that we currently have. It's just cool to play, so overly there's less stress put on theory and making the right choices as there was with the Minerva deck. So the Minerva deck, that's actually a variant of a successful deck in a format, and I wanted to make sure that that stayed the way that it was. But with this deck, it's a lot more lax. There is going to be some changes made to it to make it just overall function better and allow you to style more, basically, is the goal of this one. But overall, I have put some theory and testing into some ideas and stuff that I knew I wanted to change around. There were some things I knew that I immediately wanted to change, but overall, we're just gonna jump into it. I've got plenty of ideas of just what I want to move around little by little, and then we'll just get to an end result, because there are certain things that I could just see being changed around already, based off the things that I've done before. But this is the build as it was sent to me. I didn't have to modify anything to play it in ranked, which was good. If you're going to send a deck to me to do this with, I prefer that. Make sure there's no OCG cards in there that I have to swap out, because I would rather play it exactly as you send it to me, and then we do this from there. But anyway, getting into the changes, the very first thing that's going to be changed is we're adding in another Uni-Zombie. That is your best starter card, because it actually does what the Lightsworn engine is trying to do, which is milling you into your good cards. But it actually just gives you pinpoint access into that card. You can send Mizuki to grave, you can send White Prince to grave. All these different factors just come into play for making Uni-Zombie just a 3 of. It's the best starter card for this deck, because one Uni-Zombie, it's the best card to top deck too. One Uni-Zombie can send one White Prince to grave, which sends another King of the Skull, another Skull Servant, and another Lady in White to the grave. And then, depending on how many you already have in grave, you can just banish those 3 and summon a King of Skull Servants from your deck. And if you already had other cards in your grave that boost its attack, that's actually just relevant, and that's actually what you're trying to do with this deck overall. You're trying to just turbo into King of the Skull Servants and get him out and have him be a large backbone as to what your attacking power is going to be for most of your cases. But continuing on with the changes, I'm actually going to do a swap. I'm going to take one Lady in White out, but I'm going to add in another White Prince. Now, the reason for this is that White Prince is a card that you want to see and mill before you mill Lady in White. Having two White Prince and 3 Lady in White, it just seemed awkward to me, in the fact that you're playing so many mill cards in your deck. But if you just hit a White Prince off of any of those, or if you just have White Prince, you can discard it off Uni-Zombie's effect to discard from hand, stuff like that. It just gives you more value there. And that was something that I wasn't really saying. And that's another thing, is that, again, the whole Uni-Zombie thing being a linchpin. If you have Uni-Zombie and White Prince in your hand, then Uni-Zombie can send a White Prince from your deck to grave, send a Skull Servant and a Lady in White from deck to grave, and then Uni-Zombie can then discard the White Prince from your hand, thus sending another Skull Servant and another Lady in White to the grave, and then you can banish 3 Summon King of the Skull Servants from your deck at 3k. That's just a little 2-card combo that starts your style engine rolling. I'm going to keep saying style and referring to it as a style engine, because that's basically what it is. We will have to fix this extra deck as well, because a lot of this I just found was not needed. I don't know how you're supposed to make Dante, because every time you could make Dante, there's always something different you could do that actually just put more cards in circulation. But we'll get to that later. Lionheart also, I never made it because, like, what are you going to do with 3 level 1s on the field that aren't King of the Skull Servants that you don't want to just keep? But carrying on. This, Minerva, Lightsworn Maiden, that's not the right Minerva. It's coming out. We are going to instead replace it with more cards that just get your engine moving. The 3rd Raiden, and then we're also going to put in a Lila just for the Randy backrow removal. Just to have a backrow removal option. The Raiden being the level 4 tuner is actually just relevant. It's actually the most relevant thing, but also the fact that it mills in the main phase. Your Minerva, sure, it's cool if you like discard it and mill a card, but like, what are you trying to accomplish there? Are you trying to hit a White Prince? There were only 2 of those in the deck. Are you trying to hit Damage Juggler, Trick Clown? You can just overall increase your odds of hitting those cards by just, getting Raiden anyway. And then Lila is obviously for, the back row removal, because you want to have like at least one piece of back row removal in your deck at some point. I'm going to move these around just so that I can satisfy my OCD. One thing that we're doing as well is that we're cutting upstarts, and now, again, this deck isn't like 100% competitive. I can understand the need to play upstarts, or like the feeling that you need to play upstarts in this deck, but this deck isn't meant to be overly competitive, so you can afford to just not play 37 cards, especially since you're also playing just tons of vanillas. Like, I would consider, this deck has so many vanillas in it, I would even consider, like, you've got Garnets, I would consider this a brick vanilla, I would consider, like, Lady in White's vanillas. These are obviously vanillas. Like, you don't want to draw into those cards, you don't want to increase your chances of drawing into those cards, because yes, Upstart Goblin increases your chances of drawing into like your starter cards like Mizuki, Brilliant Fusion, Charge the Light Brigade, Raiden, Solar Recharge, all these things. They're certainly factors, but it also just increases your chances of drawing into what I can only say is like 10 brick vanillas. And so I just don't see the need. You can just replace these cards with more impactful cards that actually just like mold game states better, which would, in this situation, more than likely be instant fusions. In fact, I believe that's what is going to end up being in here. Move this because I'm OCD. Solar Recharge. I'm going to slice this down to 2 simply because the Lightsworn engine isn't that large. And while you do want to mill cards, like the drawing cards, again, we don't want to really put an emphasis on that because you have so many just bricks in your deck that you don't want to get into. Now, of course, there is merit to milling the right cards, but you just have to get lucky. Whereas with like Raiden, you're going to be milling cards anyway, so your milling engine is definitely just strong. This is just basically gives you a nice little 8-card Lightsworn package that just kind of neatly wraps up your deck with a nice little bow and gets you into the situations that you want to try and be in overall. But let's see. I am going to keep moving these around so that I can keep my thought processes moving. I'm very OCD when it comes to making decks. I cannot just click this sort button. I can't. If I'm just throwing random cards in and then hitting sort to see what it looks like, then yes. But if I'm fine-tuning something, no. Everything has a place and needs to stay in its place. Garnet, that is something that I almost forgot about. We are slicing this down to 1. Now, I understand why there were 2 Brilliant Fusions and 2 Garnets, because, I mean, you could be milling cards, but there's nothing that says that you wouldn't just mill Brilliant Fusions before Garnets anyway, and the fact that you can just, like, mill Garnet is fine. There's such a low percentage chance with 2 Brilliant Fusions and Garnet that you will draw Garnet and Brilliant Fusion in your opening hand, in the same hand. There's very, very little chance, and overall, it just takes up less space. It's less of a brick, and, I mean, like, if you mill it, that's fine. You have access to Daigusto Emerald, and then most of the time you're able to access Cyframe Lord Omega, and if that dies, I can put the Garnet back as well. There are multiple ways to recur the Garnet to get your Brilliant Fusions live again. That's definitely not as big a factor as you might think it is. Now, it might look very weird to you on paper, but it's definitely something that just ultimately comes out being fine in the end. These are going over there. Now, whatchamadoodads. These are the tuners, so I'm going to group them together. And then, yeah, 3 Uni-Zombies, 3 Mizukis, all that seems good. The last change to the monster lineup that is going to be made is I'm going to be adding in another Trick Clown. Now, since this deck is emphasized on its, like, milling engine with, like, Raiden, Charge the Light Brigade, stuff like that, and, the further emphasis on Uni-Zombie, especially, having that hand effect, Trick Clown is just a card that seems to me to be a solid 2 of. If anything, Trick Clown might get swapped out for a third damage juggler before the end of this, but I do really like the 2-to-1 ratio. Whenever I'm not playing the Pendulum Clowns, whenever I'm just going back to the original clown lineup, this is the clown lineup I like the most whenever it's like you're trying to fit a small package in, because you can just get this straight off Brilliant Fusion, and if you lose one, if you burn it, or if you lose it in any certain, situation or way, you have a second one in your deck willing to, that's able to back you up on your further play without having to lock yourself into either putting it back off a Digest Swimmerl and then accessing it again, or Instant Fusion Norden bringing it back. Like, it doesn't lock you out of your Trick Clown plays as much as it does when you just have one, because it's very easy when you're just playing one Trick Clown. Coming from me playing the Pendulum deck, when you're playing one Trick Clown, when that thing's gone, like, you just immediately want it back in circulation. But having a second Trick Clown just kind of helps, mediate this. Now, let's see. I already talked about Instant Fusion. I'm going to play 2 Instant Fusions in here, and then I'm just going to put one just really good trap. And the best trap in the format right now is basically Solemn Warning, for playing its Pendulum decks, obviously, and things of that nature. Now, if you wanted to make this deck, for Bosch, pretty much the only change that I would do to it is probably take out the Lila, maybe, and then take out the Warning and put in a Treacherous Trap Hole and a Bottomless Trap Hole, and that way you can have a Rafflesia in your extra deck, and then that gives you some form of summonable defense. Those would be like the only changes that I would make in the main deck to support Bosch. But as I've already said, I'm not taking Bosch into account for this. Now, this extra deck, we are going to change a lot. Dante is coming out, Lionheart is coming out, Catastor is sure as hell coming out, and Goyo is coming out. I never find myself making Goyo. There's very few situations where you actually are able to make a 6, and when you do, like, it's because you've used Uni-Zombie's effect twice without letting it leave the board, and it's a level 5, and you can't attack with a non-zombie that turn anyway. So, like, if you're going to play a generic 6, then Red Wyvern is probably just better, because that is a form of summonable defense, and it can actually out threats and out boards and things like that. But, obviously, we have to put in is a Norden. I'm only going to put in 1 because there's only 2 Instant Fusions. The Emerald is staying in. Honor Arc is probably getting cut. Cowboy, I think, is getting cut. There's definitely going to be a second Omega in here, because there's a very good play that involves Uni-Zombie and Brilliant Fusion. If you open Uni-Zombie Brilliant Fusion, alright, that just makes double Omega for absolutely free. In fact, you plus off of it. And you make the 2 Omegas, and you end up with a banished Damage Juggler and a banished Mizuki. During your opponent's standby phase, you put back both of them, and then you take 2 cards out of their hand, and then next turn your Omegas come back, and then you have a Mizuki and a Damage Juggler search. Like, that's actually just a very large, tempo-oriented play. It's very good for sculpting your game states. And so, like, level 8 Synchros have very high utility in this deck because of Raiden, Instant Fusion, and Uni-Zombie. And, the fact that the Clown Engine is 4s as well. The Mizuki just gives you cards to bring back. You always are going to be able to make Uni-Zombie into a 4, because you've got so many zombies that you can send to the graveyard. There are all of these things. And the fact that Omega as well starts putting your banished White Princes back into your graveyard, if you use the effect to banish 3 and summon King out of your deck, like, that's actually really good as well, because that starts just putting your cards back into circulation, getting them where you need to go with them. And then as well as that, like, Omega's effect to shuffle itself from graveyard back into deck when it's in grave, and then put another card back as well, is always, like, the most relevant thing, because there are many times where I make Emerald multiple times in a game, even though there's only 1, because you can just make the 1, it'll die, and then if a Omega dies as well, you just shuffle the Emerald back, and then put the Omega back in your extra deck as well, and then you're able to make the Emerald again, and it's so easy to access Emerald because of the fact that you're playing clowns. But then that just resets cards like Mizuki's. There's all these different things that go off in your head, in your play string, that you're able to do when you have these sorts of infinite resource lines that you have access to. I could lie to you and tell you that that's just Coke and that there's no rum in it, but Ooh. I'm not a liar. But all of your combo strings and resource management play lines just kind of have to formulate their way somewhere, and they have to have their just overall route. And Omega is basically just the best card to have for that. Like, if you could justify playing 3 Omega in this extra deck, I would, but like I just don't think that there's proper space room for it when you have like things like Void Ogre and Beals. Void Ogre, I'm not 100% sure if it's like needed, but I don't see any other better option. And Beals is actually, I thought I was going to cut this card at first, but then I just ended up making it all the time against Cosmo because it can't die by battle or card effect. So like it's the safest level 8 to summon when you don't know if they have Dark Destroyer in hand, or if you know they have Dark Destroyer in hand, because they can't kill it with Dark Destroyer. And it can crash with Dark Destroyer and it won't die. Like, that was actually just the neatest interaction in the world. And then if you combine that with something like a Abyss Dweller or something like that, then you just get all these other little synergistic things that let you out Cosmo boards. Especially with the fact that King of the Skull Servants is usually huge. It just gives you all these little neat things. And speaking of which, that's why I just casually threw a Dweller into the extra deck here. This video is actually a bit longer than the Minerva one, basically because I feel like I have to talk more of my interactions out. Armades! My mans! He's going in here. Armades is a card that I always miss from this extra deck whenever I was playing it, because you have access into so many level 5 Synchros that aren't Nat Beast, because this boosts itself to 4, you can put 1s on the board, there are all these different things that come up. You have Mizukis that continually put 1s on the board, they put 3s on the board, it gets your tuner back. There's all of these things. All of these things come up. Now, what was the last card that was in this extra deck? That is right, I remember. The last card I wanted to put in was Karn Gorgon, the Anti-Luminescent Knight. Now, you may be wondering why this card. This card seems like a very oddball pick, and you are correct. This card is something that you make with Instant Fusion, or if you just have like a Mizuki play to put 2 4s on the board, if you have a Clown play to put 2 4s on the board, anything like that. This is a card that you make alongside your field of King of the Skull Servants and the Lady in White. I will explain. If you have a field that has King of the Skull Servants up with Lady in White, and your King of the Skull Servants is very big, it obviously can't die in battle. It can't die in battle, and it's unaffected by spell and trap effects because of Lady in White. Alright? Now, the most obvious cookie cutter outs to this card are cards like Diamond Dyer and Castel, because those bypass the Lady in White. Those cards both target. Karn Gorgon is the easiest rank 4 to make that offers that last layer of protection for King of the Skull Servants. If you put Karn Gorgon with Lady in White out and King of the Skull Servants, congratulations. King of the Skull Servants can't be, affected by spells or traps, it can't be destroyed in battle, and it can't be targeted by anything. Because if your opponent tries to target it with Castel or target it with Diamond Dyer, you can just use Karn Gorgon and redirect the target to their own Castel or Diamond Dyer or whatever card they had on the field if they use Diamond Dyer. Multiple different things. You can redirect the target to something else, making King of the Skull Servants very hard to out at that specific point in time. Like, overall, it's just the most solid 15th extra deck card that I could think to put in here, because it just solidifies your ability to do the things that you're trying to do, which is to beat them with King of the Skull Servants. That's the entire point of this deck. So that's basically all the changes that I feel like I want to make to it. Game videos are going to be forthcoming. I don't know if I'm going to be doing them in ranked, because Bosch is legal. Not sure. Bosch is legal in ranked at this point in time, so I'm not sure how I'm going to play this in an environment where it will actually be, a fair trial run of it. But I am going to try and give it a shot, and those videos will go up either today or a day or so in the future, depending on how long it takes me to set that up and get it moving. But anyway, that is it for this Deck Doctor. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the nonsense you usually do. If you want to suggest a deck for me to do this sort of little mini-series type thing on where I play with it, do a Deck Doctor of it, and then play with it after I've modified it, send the deck list to my Facebook fan page, which there is a link to in the description. Not my personal Facebook, the Facebook fan page. Send it to me in message form. I will take a look at it, I promise. At the very least, I'll give you a little bit of feedback on it if that's something you're looking for. But if I intend to play it, I will get around to it. It may not be immediate, but it's definitely something that I will keep in the back of my mind. I keep them all archived there, and whenever I'm looking for something to play, that's always where I go first. So if you want your name and your deck in the hat of things to choose from, definitely send them there. And who knows, maybe it'll be the nice thing I choose for this little mini-series. But anyway, click on that if you have not. I'd greatly appreciate it. It helps me make money, and there's no reason to lie to you guys about that. It just is a huge way to show your support of the things that I'm doing, and shows me that you like the things that I'm doing. And it speaks volumes in terms of whether or not I should continue making these types of videos or not. Leave a comment down below if you like this type of thing, like this series, like the things that I'm doing with this. Just leave your feedback any way that you can think of. Like the video, all that nonsense. I'm just rambling at this point, so I think that means it's time to end the video. So that is all for this video. Thank you for watching once again, and as always, guys, take care. Rum and Coke out.